The stadium went silent before anyone fully understood what had happened. Not the kind of silence that follows a strikeout or a foul ball or a close play at the plate. A different kind of silence. The kind that descends on a crowd of 40,000 people when something has gone wrong in a way that nobody can immediately measure. When a player is on the ground and nobody is moving and the only sound is the distant hum of a ballpark that has suddenly forgotten how to breathe. Shohei Ohtani was down. And in the press boxes, in the dugouts, in living rooms across the country where people had been casually watching a Tuesday night game between the Dodgers and the Royals, everything stopped. Nobody moved for 3 full seconds. Not his teammates. Not the umpires. Not the Royals catcher, who stood exactly where he had been standing when it happened, not stepping forward, not stepping back, just standing there in the particular stillness of a man who knows that every camera in the building is now pointed directly at him. Those 3 seconds felt like something much longer. And what came after them changed the entire complexion of a game that had barely begun. To understand what happened in the 3rd inning, you have to understand the mood that had already settled over that ballpark before the first pitch was ever thrown. This was not a neutral game. This was not 2 teams meeting in the middle of a long season with nothing particular at stake beyond the standings. There had been tension building between these clubs across previous games. Small moments that didn't make the big headlines but accumulated in the way these things always accumulate inside a baseball season, in the dugouts, in the clubhouses, in the looks exchanged between players when the other team does something that sits wrong. Baseball has a long memory. Longer than most sports. The grudges are quiet but they run deep, and by the time the Dodgers and the Royals took the field that evening, both sides knew they were playing in something with more underneath it than a typical regular season game. Ohtani had been locked in from the beginning. He always is. But there was something particular about the way he was carrying himself through those early innings, the focus, the precision, the sense of a man who had identified exactly what he needed to do and was executing it with the calm certainty of someone who has been in every version of a big moment before and is no longer surprised by any of them. The Royals knew it. Their dugout knew it. Their catcher knew it better than anyone. The play happened quickly. The way dirty plays always happen, fast enough to look accidental to anyone who isn't watching closely, slow enough in the replays that follow to reveal something much more deliberate in every detail. Ohtani was moving toward the plate. The ball was coming in. These were the basic facts of the play, and on their surface they were unremarkable, the kind of collision situation that occurs dozens of times across a baseball season without anyone's name ending up in a headline. But the Royals catcher didn't just block the plate. He moved into Ohtani. He dropped his shoulder in that particular way, late, targeted, angled, that anyone who has watched enough baseball recognizes immediately as a choice rather than an accident. It was the kind of contact designed not to prevent a run but to send a message. To remind a player that the game can hurt you if the right person decides it should. The contact was hard. Ohtani went down. He stayed down. The crowd, which had been building toward a roar at the possibility of a Dodgers run, swallowed the sound back down into itself and went very, very quiet. His teammates reached him first. Not sprinting, that particular controlled urgency of professional athletes who need to move fast but also need to not make the situation look worse than it already is in front of 40,000 people and every camera in the building. They gathered around him in a loose protective circle, the way teammates do, blocking the sightlines from the stands just enough to give him a moment that wasn't public. Ohtani sat up. That came first, and the collective breath that the stadium released when he did was audible enough to be its own kind of sound. He sat up slowly, one hand on the ground, testing something. Not his leg. Something internal. The kind of check that athletes do when they are figuring out whether what they feel is pain they can play through or pain that means something more serious. The Dodgers' dugout emptied before anyone had made a formal decision to empty it. Not wildly. Not in the chaotic rush of a bench-clearing brawl that starts from nothing. This was something more deliberate. Players walking onto the field with the specific energy of men who have made a collective decision about what the situation requires, moving toward their teammate and toward the catcher who put him on the ground in a way that was already being rewatched on every phone in the stadium. The Royals came out too. That was when it became something else entirely. What happened next lasted 4 minutes and 11 seconds according to the official record. It felt considerably longer to everyone inside that ballpark. There was pushing. There were words, the kind of words that get lost in the crowd noise but whose meaning is completely clear from the expressions on the faces of the men saying them. There were umpires moving through bodies trying to separate people who did not particularly want to be separated. There were managers on the field adding their voices to something that had already moved past the point where voices were going to resolve it. The benches were fully cleared. The bullpens emptied. For a few minutes, the entire game, the score, the innings, the standings, all of it, ceased to matter in any meaningful way. What mattered was 40,000 people on their feet watching two baseball teams work through something that had been building for longer than this game. 3 ejections were issued before order was restored. The Royals' catcher was one of them. He walked off the field without looking back. The sound that followed him from the crowd was not kind. Ohtani stayed in the game. That detail landed on the stadium like a statement. He had been evaluated on the field. He had been evaluated again in the dugout. And then, when the inning resumed and the lineup came back around, he was still in it. Still in the batter's box. Still doing what he came to do. The crowd's response to seeing him back at the plate was the loudest single moment of the entire evening. Not for a home run. Not for a strikeout. Just for the act of him standing there, of him refusing to let a dirty play in the 3rd inning be the last word on what kind of night this was going to be. His teammates in the dugout were on the top step. The coaching staff was watching with the particular expression of men who are relieved and furious at the same time and have not yet fully decided which feeling is going to win. The post-game press conference carried a weight that filled the room before Roberts even sat down. He entered slowly. Took his seat. Looked out at the reporters with the expression of a man who has processed something fully and is now prepared to discuss it without any of the rawness that was present 2 hours ago. The first question was direct. Was it a dirty play? Roberts didn't flinch. He didn't reach for diplomatic language. He didn't perform the careful neutrality that managers sometimes use when they want to say something without quite saying it. He said what he saw. He said the play was unacceptable. He said the league would have the opportunity to review it and he trusted that process. But he did not disguise what he believed had happened or why it had produced the response it produced from his team. When someone goes after one of your players like that, he said, his voice completely level, you respond. That's not optional. That's not a choice you make in the moment. That's just who you are as a team. He paused for exactly long enough to let that settle. And this team knows who it is. But it was Ohtani's words that stunned the room into a different kind of quiet. He had not been expected to speak at length. He rarely does after games that carry this kind of charged atmosphere. He tends to let the performance speak and keep the rest private. But tonight he sat in front of the microphone and spoke with a directness that reporters who have covered him for years said they had rarely heard from him before. He said that what happened on that play was felt. Not just physically. He was clear about that, he didn't want anyone to misunderstand what he was saying. The physical part he could handle. He had handled harder things than a catcher's shoulder. What he was talking about was something else. He said that there is a difference between playing hard and playing to hurt. He said that every player on every team understands that difference even if they never say it out loud. And he said that what happened tonight had crossed that line in a way that he felt needed to be said clearly and publicly, not because he wanted to cause problems, but because silence in moments like this is its own kind of statement. The room was very still. A reporter asked him how he felt right now. Not physically. Just, how did he feel? Ohtani was quiet for a moment. He looked at the table. Then he looked up. "I feel like my teammates showed me something tonight that I won't forget," he said. "They came out there before I even stood up. I saw that." He didn't say anything else about the brawl. He didn't need to. The Dodgers won the game. The final score will be recorded in the standings and eventually forgotten the way most regular season scores are forgotten, absorbed into the long river of a baseball season that moves too fast for any single game to stay visible for long. But the third inning of that game, the silence that fell over 40,000 people, the teammates moving onto the field, the 4 minutes and 11 seconds that followed, and Ohtani standing back in the batter's box afterward like a statement written in real time, that will not be forgotten so quickly. Some nights baseball is just baseball. A game played between the lines and filed away when it's over. And some nights it becomes something that reveals exactly who people are when it matters most. Ohtani went down in the third inning of a Tuesday night game against the Kansas City Royals. He got back up. And the people who were there, in the stands, in the dugout, in that press conference room, already knew that the story of that night was never really about whether he got hurt. It was always about what happened next. That was Ohtani. And that, in the end, is the only story that ever needed to be told.